Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. On this podcast, we're watching a show week to week, providing you some insight and some camaraderie along the way. Currently watching Alien Earth. We got 2 more episodes of that. And of course, on these particular episodes, we are watching the new HBO series Task, which appears to be a hit, I would presume, in the ratings, considering, Sona, this is one of our best first weeks of downloads for any show ever.
I love it.
Podcast. So if that's any indicator, there's a lot of people watching this show and listening to us, of course.
Fantastic.
Okay, the first thing I want to bring up is, of course, last night, the Emmy Awards. Sona, if you didn't watch this, I'm going to catch you up on it in the audience as well. And I'll tell you where I kind of thought were some outliers. Honestly, not many surprises here on the list. Winner for Best Drama is The Pit. I assumed this was going to be the case, by the way. I'm pretty happy about this. A show
I
that
know
is
you loved it.
I did love it. And even though it's not like the most ambitious, or as a matter of fact, it's pretty like old school, I have to say that I think people wanted this kind of thing. And when this was on the air for 15 weeks, I got to tell you, the thing I looked forward to the most every single week was my fix of The Pit. And apparently a lot of people felt the same way because this won Best Drama, and a lot of really good dramas nominated this year, but this is the winner. Also won Best Actor for Noel Riley. Well-deserved, I think. That show is in your mind. When you picture that show, if you've watched it at all, you picture him. And the second person, very happy to see win, is Catherine Lanasa, who plays the charge nurse, basically, for The Shift. And as my wife said, those people run the show. And she is always in the background. She's never like the center of the story, truly a supporting actress. But you just know that that whole emergency room is operating because of what she's doing. Mm-hmm. And she's fantastic and very recognizable. Like if you see the show, you're not like someone like she's been a star of a show before, but you're like, oh, I've seen that person like 100 times on like traditional TV. And she is really a standout this year. And she won Best Supporting Actress. Severance, though, also, which was nominated for Best Series, did get some very big awards. Best Actress for Britt Lauer and Best Supporting Actor for Tremel Tillman. Shocking, Sona, the first Black man to ever win Best Supporting Actor.
That is really shocking.
Truly, right? You would have thought we might have made a little further at this point.
Well, I do think...
I should say in drama, I think specifically. Not
right, exactly. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. But still, pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And well-deserved. I mean, what an incredible standout for him. Oh, and by the way, anybody who's seen the new Mission Impossible film, the whole middle of that film really drags. It's one of the worst Mission Impossible films, although it has an incredible stunt at the end, as I've outlined here before. But in the middle, when he's on the submarine, minor spoiler alert here, who's the captain of the submarine? It's Tremel Tillman, and he is just incredible. When he shows up on his ship, he's like, what the hell are you doing here? And he just like enlivens everything that's happening in that centerpiece of the film. So very well cast as well. They kind of probably knew we need something to energize this middle of the movie, and they got it with him. So hopefully he gets a lot more movie work. He's really talented, obviously. Best comedy, not a surprise here at all, and well-deserved. The studio wins Best. Apple TV, big time, by the way, representation, not only in nominations, but in wins here. Wins Best Comedy and wins Best Actor for Seth Rogen. Seth Rogen also wins Best Writing for the studio and Best Directing for the studio. So Seth Rogen is like, what a coming out year for him here. Like really, truly a media titan. Who would have thunk it? And no surprises here at all. The miniseries or anthology winners across the board, I had predicted this was going to be a sweep, and it pretty much was. Best Director, Best Writing for Adolescence, Best Series, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor for The Boy Who Gets Arrested, Owen Cooper. Incredible performance, by the way, for such a young actor. And as a psychiatrist on their psychologist, Erin Doherty, Supporting Actress. Incredible. And by the way, just from a directing standpoint, if you're familiar with this, anybody out there who hasn't seen it already, most people I think who want to see this show has seen it. It's a massive word of mouth success for Netflix, and now going to get, I'm sure, a second wind with all of these awards. But all these individual episodes shot in one continuous take. So just the technical aspects of that are pretty incredible and really quite an achievement. Christine Milioti wins Best Actress in a limited series for The Penguin. Very well deserved. Usually comedic actress. This is the reason for me that The Penguin works. I know your husband watched The Penguin, correct?
Yes, and he said that was a very well-deserved award for her.
Yes. As is Colin Farrell under all the makeup. He gives a real performance. Like you don't think that that's him under there. You just really just feel the character. But once again, the show itself doesn't work without having her as like a good counterpoint to him. Best actress, best supporting actress for Hacks again. Well, maybe I think best supporting actress, this is her first time winning, but I think this is the fourth time in a row that
Jean Smart.
So time to move. I mean, I thought there were some other really good actresses in this category. Could have moved it on to somebody else here. And I have not watched Hacks since like season 1, which I very much liked, but just never went back to it.
Same.
So, congratulations to them. I hear it's still a good show, but maybe it's time to move on to. Sometimes the Emmy gets into a rut where they just keep giving the award to the same people over and over again. Like, cast the net a little wider next time, folks. And best supporting actor in comedy goes to Jeff Hiller in Somebody Somewhere, like somebody who like never acted before. So quite an amazing for him. I saw Somebody Somewhere for season 1, never watched season 2 or season 3, but I did like that show. And definitely very like a heartfelt show about just like kind of misfits finding themselves, very autobiographical to the woman who is the writer and star of that show. So, an interesting HBO series, definitely something to catch up on. And just not an interesting story for him, someone who had like not been a professional actor and now winning an Emmy Award. Pretty impressive. And then for writing, unfortunately, Andor really deserved to win a lot more awards than it did, but it did win Best Writing. Very well deserved. An excellent series. And I think I mentioned already Adolescence for Best Limited Series, The Studio for Best Comedy. On the Best Directing side, Seth Rogen, once I said, like I mentioned, for Studio, that's really well deserved too. If you've watched that show, every episode is kind of like a technical challenge they gave themselves, oftentimes shooting everything in one take also. So very technically impressive for sure. But then in drama, not Severance, not Andor. They gave it to Slow Horses, which is a really good show, but I thought last season was the worst season of that show, although still fun. And it was, very fast paced because it was all shot like in one weekend. So there was that aspect to it. The storyline is very concise, but to give it best direction, I mean, like Severance had some pretty stellar episodes. Andor, of course, had some stellar episodes. The White Lotus had been nominated here. I don't know if they deserve it deserve that award, but definitely a solid show. And by the way, coming back next week for its next season. All right, really briefly, Sona, did you watch any of The Girlfriend, just out of curiosity?
So I meant to. And I saw ads for it that reminded me that I wanted to, but instead I caught up on Platonic.
Okay, cool. I think I just caught up on Platonic. I think I'm caught up on Platonic. And I think there's 2 episodes left, so maybe we can touch base again when it gets to the end. This season has been entertaining, but not as stellar as for season 1. But we can see how it lands. We're only a couple weeks away on that one.
I agree.
The Girlfriend, I actually was curious to get your take on it because I watched the pilot. And I liked that. I only watched the first 2 episodes. I liked the second episode, not enough to go back to it, but I really did not like the pilot. So I was kind of off on it. And I just kind of watched a little bit more just to see if I got better. And I did like episode 2 significantly better, but not enough for me to binge the show. So maybe I'll get around to it. Honestly, I think I'm probably not. The boat may have sailed on that show at this point, although I think it was very popular last week. But on binges in general, if you don't kind of get to it right away, it kind of falls by the wayside. And of course, Apple TV, the morning show is coming back soon. Have you ever seen any of the morning show at all?
Not a single episode. And it seems like a show that would be right up my alley.
Yeah,
I
that's surprising.
Haven't gotten around to it.
I think even my wife has seen season 1 of that show. So I was surprised you never got around to it. I also have not seen any of that at all.
I never got around to it. And now it feels like it's too far gone.
It's too late.
Yeah.
It's like 4 or 5 seasons in now. I'm like, I think it's too late, right? Although I hear the show's not that good anyway. So you're probably not missing too much. Oh, and of course, as I mentioned, Slow Horses is coming. Savant is coming. The Savant is coming that same week. In the week, maybe Sona will transition over to that show.
Looks great.
It does look great. The Lost Bus is coming the week after that. The Last Frontier is coming the week after that. This one's another interesting, a thriller about a sheriff who used to work in a city and has moved out to like an Alaskan town. He's living out there, and a plane full of convicts crashes in his woods, and they are now on the loose. And it's kind of like they're on the clock trying to track these guys down. So another interesting series coming to Apple TV within the next few weeks. And there's more that I'm skipping here along the way, but all culminating, of course, with the new series Pluribus, which is coming November 3rd, I think it is. So just about a month and a half away. And that's going to be a big deal considering we have this Better Call Saul talent reunion with the writers and the creator and the actress. So all very interesting things to come. Apple's really hot right now. So very curious to see how things play out. Oh, and one more thing, Sona, you might be interested in seeing, and the audience for sure, we might be covering this somewhere on the podcast within the next week or two, but there's a new binge coming to Netflix this week called Black Rabbit. Have you seen the trailer for this?
I don't think so.
You may like this. It's a thriller about two brothers. The brother who's a screw up, who is going to get killed if this debt can't be paid off, is Jason Bateman, scuzzy Jason Bateman.
Love Jason Bateman.
And his successful brother, who runs a very successful bar/club in the city, is played by Jude Law. Very strange combination of brothers here. Basically, he is trying to save his brother, and it's one of those uncut gems type movies. From the trailer, it looks like it's one of those things where you take one step forward, two steps back, and things just keep escalating and escalating. So could be a very fun watch. They definitely are promoting it. When you see the trailer, it feels like they're trying to make it feel like uncut gems. So I'm not sure if you can maintain that kind of pressure for more than 2 hours, a whole entire series. But I'm very curious to see it. And the early reviews have been good. And that's coming on Thursday, this very Thursday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's not just this month. The backlog of stuff from the writer's strike is all starting to come out. And I have this spreadsheet where I'm just kind of keeping track of returning shows, a new series that I'm just curious about. And I just keep them on the spreadsheet. And then when I have a release date, I move them around. And Sona, starting this September, basically is where the spreadsheet begins till the end of 2026. So like a 15-month period. Sona, there are 40 shows on there, 40 shows on that list.
Yikes, feast or famine.
It really is feast or famine. We just spent a summer with nothing to cover. And then we have like possibly 3 or 4 shows per month for the rest of the next year or two, which is great for us. So, who like watching TV. So. All right, so let's get into this episode of Task. First of all, the title is called Family Statements, Sona. So lots of different, what a family statement is here, obviously from a legal term, but also lots of statements about families here in this. And maybe this whole show, a statement about families in and of itself.
Definitely.
And a couple of things I want to mention. My wife finally caught up on this episode. She'd seen like 5 minutes of it and finally later in the week watched the whole entire thing. And I sat along with her, and just some observations I had, the pacing issues that we had in, not only you brought that up, Sona, but when I brought it up with Darren as well, he had mentioned that he thought it was a little slow paced till I got to the end. I guess when you know where the story is going by the end of the episode. Then it
feels like a build, right?
Yeah, it did not feel slow at all. Like I thought it was like perfectly paced. So I, like on a second watch, felt like really well written, where I felt like I was bumping against certain things in that first watch. So very odd. I usually don't have that experience. Usually I have like a lesser experience the second time around. So just surprised myself and wanted to call that out.
Yeah, with the context, it made more sense.
Absolutely, yeah. The second thing that I totally forgot to bring up, we did not bring up at all in our recap. There's an insider, of course, that have been feeding information to Robbie and his cohorts. Of course, now that is a central plot point here after this second episode. And this is mostly going to be pretty serious, and we're going to get into themes and get into some pretty dark stories. So I wanted to make sure we kick things off with the funny bits. What did you think about Lizzie Snickerdoodle singing up in her office and like completely cluelessly, they're calling her and they're calling her, they're calling her. He's in the room with her and she still gets surprised. Like, what is proper etiquette when someone is like this?
I honestly thought he took it really well, because I would have been way more indignant. Hey, I knocked, I waved. What else do you need me to do here to get your attention? I mean, I found it very nervy for her to act as if he had snuck up on her.
Something I have to like really admire in the writing of the show, there's something that's very naturalistic about how things like within a family or within a dynamic in a group seems to just emerge naturally. And I think I can't even remember, I brought something up last week where that kind of hit me the same way. But I love the fact that, for example, that Tom, the Mark Ruffalo character, is kind of like, don't call her Snickerdoodle, right? And then by the end of the episode, he's like trying to get her attention and yelling up the stairs. And he's like, yo, Snickerdoodle. That has simply become her name now.
Well, she set him straight by the end of the episode. I think they found a middle ground on that.
I think she's stuck with that one for now. But that does segue into when she kind of confronts Grasso about, don't make fun of my email address anymore. And he goes, hey, I have my old email too. And he was DJ Grassanova.
So good.
And again, the idea of something to be very lived in. I love this whole idea that she's like, oh, did you have any kind of like spiel that you kick things off? And he's like, oh yeah, maybe I remember it. And he just goes on this tear, which I thought is so fantastic, because I think we all have that where when you were a teenager, you had like a rap that you memorized in your mind or something that, you obsessed on when you were a teenager. And of course, that thing you can't remember people who you just met. You can't even remember their names a week later, but that stuff is just embedded in your brain forever. What did you think about that? Is that going to get you on the dance floor? His whole spiel?
I love this scene and the chemistry between the actors, and he's a very charismatic guy. So I enjoyed watching all of this. I could see him as DJ Grassanova.
Yeah. And one more light thing to bring up before we get into the episode. When Tom is scarfing down that sandwich when that guy shows up. That is definitely a Philly cheesesteak that he's eating right there.
And then he doesn't have a napkin, and he uses the foil as a napkin.
Can't find a napkin. Yep. Always happens. And one more like sweet bit here that I wanted to call out, not in the comedy side, but when Robbie is spending time with Sam, I thought all their interactions were very sweet. How he is really warming up to this kid, which is maybe just going to make the inevitable more difficult. But
the kid all around seems like such a sweet kid. And it's really sad to think about the things he must have seen and what he's been through.
I think that's why they cast this kid, is just that, like you said, there's just some real warmth there. And you picture how gentle this kid must be, and and maybe his parents were sweet to him, but just getting, run around, and maybe they weren't sweet to him, right? Because he was being punished by sleeping in the basement. It wasn't just keeping him out of the way so he wouldn't see bad things. So, yeah, you can only imagine this poor kid has been, put through the ringer. And in a way, this is maybe a nice vacation for him, ironically, in this particular moment. He wants to pet the chickens. I never thought about petting chickens, but I guess their feathers are kind of soft.
I don't know if this is taken off in your town, but there is this whole hipster movement towards having chickens, which is very big in Brooklyn, at least. I'm not sure the regulations on keeping chickens, but I would imagine that people would develop fondness for their chickens.
We have friends of ours, they're Turkish, and they have like a fig tree. They grow eggplants and zucchinis and you name it. They have bees that make honey. Wow. But they also have chickens and a chicken coop. So I don't know if there's any kind of regulation against that, because I don't think they have any kind of special ordinance to allow them to grow their chickens, but they do have chickens as well. And they have eggs. They have fresh eggs. Whenever we go over there, they give us some fresh eggs. They're not hipsters, though. Far from it. But, they grew up on farm, and that's kind of what they're culturally connected to.
My husband's grandfather kept chickens as well. So that's a Hispanic cultural thing, I think, kind of, to keep chickens. It's not unusual. So it crosses cultural boundaries, the chicken keeping.
That's right. That's right. The one thing that can unify us in this.
That's right.
In these very divided times.
The chicken coops.
The chicken coops. That's right. Start a political movement, the chicken coopers. Okay, so this episode, Family Statements, as I mentioned before, the plot picks up immediately after the events of episode 1. That FBI task force is literally up all night trying to track down this kid. Robbie and his partners have been his partner, I should say, has been up all night watching the kid and worrying about, maybe the cops showing up, maybe the kid's waking up and just discovering things as they are. And he calls in sick, makes him some kind of excuse. Meanwhile, the task force itself is trying to track down, once they've identified Peaches, they're trying to find out where he's been staying. He apparently was staying with Katie and David Prater. I guess no relationship to Prater from Dexter Resurrection. Or is there? Maybe this is a shared universe. It's not that far from New York. This does not go well. How do you think they handled this questioning, by the way? Of course, Katie completely loses it.
I think it might be Kaylee, by the way.
It is Kaylee. Yes, you're right. Kaylee. What did you think about this questioning? Because obviously she loses it, but her dad going from like, that boyfriend, I knew he was a loser, but wasn't he letting him stay in his house? And anyway, I'm very curious to know how that whole circumstance occurred, to say the least. But also, I think DJ Grassanova over here doesn't do a great job of pressing her a little too quickly. So kind of lose her when she's, So I felt like he maybe jumped in a little later. And I was thinking that Tom might, kind of push him back a little bit on his technique. But I feel like they lost it. And by the way, we'll get to the end eventually when we get there.
I questioned what had happened before we came in on this scene, because the whole tone of the questioning seemed really not designed to be very productive to get the information that they needed, the way they were treating her, and I thought actually when Grasso interrupted, he was going to take the dad to another room, maybe, so that they could have a one-on-one questioning that might be a little bit gentler and warmer. But instead, it was just like, your boyfriend did some really bad things. Tell us everything you know. And this girl is hysterical. It was kind of uncomfortable to watch. And I feel like they must be better at their jobs than this is showing me.
Well, I mean, maybe that's what they're trying to show us. First of all, Grasso, this is, he's very young, obviously.
True.
And Tom's been out of the field for a while. So maybe it's trying to show us that they're...
he was a chaplain. He should, and he was sent to disaster sites. Like, he should know how to make people feel comforted and let their guard down a little bit.
Yes. I mean, I thought this was very badly handled. First of all, you're questioning someone who's basically a child herself, not segueing from empathy into using that empathy to, we're trying to help this prevent anyone else from getting hurt. You're there. Who are his friends? Maybe they're targets as well. You might be in danger if someone comes knocking on your door. So, be showing some kind of empathy. But like you said, he should have done better. I mean, he used to be a chaplain, so he should have had led with empathy, to say the least. Also that morning, the leader of the Dark Arts, Jason is his name, gets the news. And I found this very interesting, by the way, that when he gets the news and he's talking to his girlfriend or wife, whoever's there with him, there's this real softness to him. Like he's like emotionally upset, especially about the boy disappearing. But then I think there's something being said here that in public, he's got to be so hard, especially as his gang leader, right? So he can't show that. So he can only get angry. So I do think that there's something being said here about the fact that men can only express any kind of emotion in public as anger. And maybe that dovetails with, unfortunately, the world we live in right now. But at the same time, it's just this strange irony that I think they're illustrating here.
Yeah, there's a whole kind of, I don't know if meme is the right word for it, but men say that women can be too emotional about so many things. And it's like they've successfully rebranded anger as not being an emotion.
Exactly.
Because men feel anger so much, but we accept it. We don't say those men are too emotional. But all of the other range of emotions you can feel, all of those fall under the umbrella of things that you can be too emotional in showing, but not anger.
Right. And if a woman has a lot of different expressions, or if anybody shows multiple different feelings about something, like you said, it's like it seems erratic. But hey, if you're just angry 100% of the time, no problems, I guess. But at least that's the story. And we find out some other details here. This character, Perry, who's like a real father figure to him. He was a lost teenager. This is all comes out very well done. I think that without speechifying too much, that they fill in a lot of blanks in the plot and the back.
I mean, beautifully edited, I thought, when they explain the whole structure of the gang and how it works and the story of how they got to this point. The photographs were all really striking and all of it was put together really well, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. And that happens a couple of times where you're intercutting two different things happening in the story, but filling in backstory and even filling in blanks without explicitly saying things. Like, for example, there's this guy, they only give you one name, was beaten to death. And we talked to his daughter at one point. And just from the intercutting, we realized that of course, is Robbie's brother and Maeve's dad. So now that's another really interesting, incredible revelation here that is almost like incepted into the plot, which is the fact that this is not arbitrary. These guys aren't just hitting dope houses for no reason. This is revenge. He wants revenge against these folks who he thinks or he knows murdered his brother.
Right.
And partially, like, they believe not only that, well, him being in this motorcycle gang got him killed. It's not that generic. They literally think that this Jason character beat his brother, her dad, to death.
Yes.
So, of course, they...
Yes.
And then we find out that Perry's like, not only are people getting killed now because there's this rot from the inside of people not trusting each other across these gangs or even within the gang itself. We might actually start seeing them beating confessions out of people in the very next episode, possibly looking for who this mole might be. So not only is this kind of rot happening from inside, that Perry explicitly says to Jason that I picked you, I groomed you to be the leader, I propped you up, and everybody out there right now is saying, why is this happening under his leadership? And they're not doing enough, and it's getting worse, and now someone's dead. So once again, this may primarily be to make Jason look bad, right? To in a way to destroy Jason, because of course they explicitly blame him specifically for the brother's death. Yeah, so of course now we understand this motivation. It enriches everything here, right? If they were just criminals, of course the stakes are high, but now there's very personal stakes here as well. I'm just looking through my notes because I just covered a bunch of stuff that I was just said right now. Oh, but some more details on that beating. So interesting clues here that are definitely going to pay off later on. Like you mentioned, very cleverly, the way they've intercutting these different scenes to reveal who they're talking about and some of this backstory. And also just seeing Maeve's face, like, as we know that they're talking about this backstory, gives you like this incredible amount of empathy for this character.
Yeah, I also, and this is not nearly as deep an observation, the haircut is really adding something to who this character is.
It's so funny. I was actually I was rewatching parts of this scenes, and I was thinking about this very scene where they're like on her face as she's showing up for work, and they're talking about, well, yeah, I talked to the daughter, and like, of course, we know exactly who they're talking about. But it's so funny. I was thinking about her bangs. You just think about someone, again, these are very specific choices when you make a show.
The whole mullet situation.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so specific. It's like she's obviously going for something and defining herself with her wardrobe, with her haircut, and it's very specific. And by the way, this is, I think, where you see a lot of shared DNA with this show and with Mayor of Easttown, is in that it's like, these are very specific characters, very different. Like, think about the young daughter there, very much like a rule follower, like a good girl who is also a lesbian. So that's different as well. But just the fact that these girls are like so different, but they're very specific. And another thing that, of course, ties these two shows together is that this crime is being investigated, but there's a very deep personal connection to the occurrences in the show as well. Oh, but going back to some of that information about that, the beating occurred because from these two guys. So one was the brother who was beaten to death. They're beaten all night. And the reason was they violated some rule. There's some rules that they violated.
Yes.
It was him and another guy got beaten also. Presumably that guy survived. They only have a first name, Billy, but they write it down on a piece of paper. So you know that that's going to be, at some point, we're going to talk to Billy and we're going to find out more about what happened at, in the incident that triggered all of this. So that's going to be an important detail and a clue to follow up with in the future. Cliff is the character whose name I can remember before. So Cliff is Robbie's friend. And this is still just the morning. This is just laying the stakes for the episode itself. He is freaking out. He doesn't like having the kid around. But at the same time, you can't assume he's thinking about doing something violent with the kid because he's literally haunted by the people he killed. And not only the people he shot, but on top of that, haunted by Peaches himself, right, who died in the process.
Yeah, I feel for Cliff. He's obviously really been through it. And I think his take on the whole situation is correct. However, I am concerned that Cliff is not the sharpest knife in the drawer based on something that happens shortly afterwards, but I don't want to jump the gun.
Robbie here is interesting. It tells you something about his character too, and his relationship with Cliff and possibly with his brother in the past. saying that, don't I always get us out of everything? So apparently this is a guy, and once again, very much in character, I think. This is a guy who even now is a little too laid back about everything that's happening, because for whatever reason, or through his charm, through his intellect, through just sheer luck, he has been able to finagle his way out of other situations. And maybe he can't do it this time, but maybe he can. But the most interesting thing he says here is that everything happens for a reason. Remember, I always tell you, I always get out of these situations because even when things go bad, it all happened for a reason. And Cliff's like, how does any of this have any reason at all? And here's maybe where he's straight up delusional, where he goes, we'll make a reason. So it's like, if we don't have a reason for what's going on, we'll make a reason for it. So in a way, maybe that means that they can, for example, frame this guy for stealing the drugs or whatever, and that could pay off in the future in some way. Or he might just be completely delusional at this point, and things are going to get much, much worse.
Yeah, I personally can't stand that phrase. Everything happens for a reason.
Yes,
it's not. Same. I feel like it's been empirically disproved, first of all. But right. Yeah.
And then, of course, they go and they open the bag, and turns out that this is fentanyl. We knew. I mean, I had presumed last week that it was some drug. I didn't realize it was fentanyl.
Yeah, good call on that.
And now they're going to have to sell the drugs. And hey, Robbie says it. Drugs are more valuable than the money anyway. But as I mentioned last week, and as we know from watching all these TV shows, moving cash and moving drugs, very, very different. Like moving art when you are in your friends and neighbors. It gets way more complicated when it's not cash. And of course, Perry is way ahead of them. Very smart. He's the brains within that organization. Not sure why Perry's not still not in power himself, but I guess we'll find out over time. But the whole idea that he says, look, the only person who can move that kind of drugs is that guy in the city, the Dominican drug dealer in the city. They are keeping it hush hush that the drugs have disappeared. They don't want it to get out through the grapevine, so that if someone shows up selling those drugs, this is all a trap that's being laid out for Robbie and co. An interesting detail they brought up earlier, by the way, is that bikers, just information you learn from watching these shows, bikers usually only deal enough drugs to pay for their own habits. But in this case, these guys are way more ambitious.
I also didn't know that bikers, as a general rule, are drug users. Maybe that's my own naivete.
Well, I mean, I think that if you watch that, what was that show called? Sons of Anarchy. But I think I never watched that. They're mostly, in that show, they're mostly doing meth. There's a lot of methy drug. I mean, bikers in Breaking Bad as well. So I guess they've moved on to, it's very different high to go from meth to keep you, I guess, wired up than to go into fentanyl. So quite the opposite. Okay, the shocking revelations keep coming, because we find out that Ethan, Tom's adoptive son, killed the mother by shoving her down the stairs. He had some psychiatric problem, I guess not fully defined yet, and he was off his meds because of COVID. See, Sona, this is another way that COVID kills. And before we get to that revelation, of course, we find out more about his background when he's driving with Grasso. He was a chaplain for the FBI. That was an interesting detail, by the way, that's how he got introduced to the FBI.
Yeah.
He mentioned something that he goes, when things go terribly wrong, people want to know why God let it happen. So interesting. Grasso takes that all in and says, hey, I went to Catholic school, and none of that stuff ever made sense to me. By the way, I went to Catholic school, and I remember even as a kid, I'm like, these rules seem pretty arbitrary. Did God really say that? I don't want to hear the tape recordings.
Well, I'm not Christian, so I will stay out of that.
But yeah, I do sympathize with Grasso's point of view on this one. But it is interesting to think about this person as a chaplain and providing comfort to, and what that says about his faith as well, right? That he thought that he could do the most good as a, providing comfort or trying to provide comfort in these moments of tragedy, and how that probably, given his tone, I think he did not think that was working, and maybe proven out by the fact that he decides to become an investigator, which is a very different type of position to have in your life, right? Not to say that things happen, like to your point earlier, that everything happens for a reason, and then that you are there to console people so they can deal with it, that instead you have this situation, or I should say the philosophy, where you are trying to be an investigator and prevent these things from happening, right? So it's very much you're moving from a purely spiritual realm in one way to a very concrete and physical realm of let's see if we can prevent these things from happening. And I'll use that as a minor reminder for everybody that we're going to be covering The Savant here, which is about somebody who prevents these type of attacks from happening. Unfortunately, they still occur. Okay, then the family gets together. They are preparing for Ethan's day in court, and the lawyer's there. I think that's the lawyer. Is that who that other guy was? I assume he's the lawyer. Was that correct?
It feels like a lawyer / family friend.
Yes. Yeah. He was a little he was so intimate in the house, but I assume maybe that was just from him being there so frequently. But yeah, he definitely also seemed to be there like officially to help them prepare for what is to come. And this was really an incredible sequence in the show just to see the dynamic in the family. This, biological daughter, she lets Emily hold the baby, but even then it seems like she's just doing it to be polite, like just, oh, could you sit down? But they are okay, relatively okay, given all this. But you see that there's all this resentment underneath her, under this as well, where she's simply like minimizing the actual fact that this was an adoptive daughter, not a biological daughter. So it's it's a pretty ugly interaction here.
Yeah, it's really uncomfortable to watch. And again, I really questioned Mark Ruffalo's character's decisions because you would think he would have interjected earlier to kind of set the biological daughter straight, that they are all one unified family. But he kind of just watched it all play out with a little bit of hemming and hawing.
Well, he seems to know that this is where she's coming from, because there's this, first of all, there's when she says her brother did this, and he says, don't say it that way. And then later where she says, she's, she was my mother too, when Emily says that, and she's like, huh, just like, and he gets really mad. But of course that Emily just exits at that point. And where did he find her? Did he find her back at the lacrosse field? Is that where that was? I was trying to remember where he knew to go find her.
Yeah, they were telling, the daughter was telling her therapist that story about the time the brother played lacrosse and got upset.
Yeah.
And they found him huddled in the dugout at the ball field. And that's where she went.
That's where she was too. Yeah. So yeah, that was a sad kind of connection between the two of them there. But she decided, after relenting here, that she is going to make a family statement, and then that could reduce his potentially his sentence. Interesting here that, of course, Sarah, the biological daughter, is really mad that this could potentially limit his sentencing. But of course, this is how everybody has duality in this particular, even with their intentions here in this particular show, is the fact that she told her school counselor that her biggest fear is that he would come back home soon, because of course she was probably terrorized by his emotions as well.
Yeah, it just seems like a really awful situation for everybody, and you can see every side of it.
Right.
Especially when the younger daughter's framework is, that she doesn't think he's going to get the treatment he needs in prison.
Right. Which is probably true. And and then, he's going to waste a large chunk of his life. He's still young, obviously, and not get better and then come out even worse. Right. But then he might get treatment. But then if he gets treatment, she's probably seeing him on his meds. She's seeing him off his meds. And is he back in the house with her? And not only emotionally, the stress of that on her, but then, of course, the fact that if he goes off his meds again at some point, then is he dangerous again? And then will she feel some culpability? Of course, that's the other part of this. Do you feel some culpability by taking a side in a way, by making that decision? And that's an interesting thing about Tom's character, and him getting drunk every single night. In a way, it's like he's not dealing with this, right? That's the other thing, that this, in a way, he gets to subvert some of his attention into this case as it gets more pressing, because he doesn't want to deal with what's happening in his home, and he's not making a decision, right? He's supporting his son. He's dropping off the suit, but he doesn't want to visit him. He doesn't want to make a family statement. he even says he's trying to rely on his faith again. He prays every night and he hears nothing. He has no, it's just silence. He hears back. So there's just really, he's at a crossroads where he knows he should forgive, but he says it explicitly. He can't forgive him. He can't. So, and of course, he probably feels like a hypocrite when he told so many people for so many years that everything happens for a reason. And, you know, God is good and you are, and you have to forgive. And like that, you know, not forgiving is toxic. And these are all things that are true, by the way, right? Like, you know, if you don't forgive, there's like a Buddhist saying that when you don't forgive somebody, that it is, or like wishing ill will against somebody is like taking poison every day, hoping that the other person gets sick.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, we all know there's nothing good, but how do you just forgive and forget? Like, it's impossible, right? Of course, especially when it's in your family, you can't even look the other way. Eventually this person's going to return to the fold in some way. So they want to make the situation as complicated as possible.
Well, they did a great job. It's super complicated.
It is super complicated. All right. So Sam, of course, has been hanging around the house. Maeve is a little suspicious right away that not everything is up on the up and up with this whole Sam situation. Robbie says, oh, you know, I had some coworkers. She's like, man, your coworkers suck. He comes up with some excuse that someone in the family was sick.
I think what she's really saying is sticking her to take care of another kid. She knows that's what's going to happen.
Very good point. Very good point. Because, he's just going to flake off like he normally does at night. But then she starts talking to Sam a little bit. And of course, Sam, just like kids want to do, tells her that, hey, he didn't even get his right. He even changed his first name. So the first time she talks to this kid, he's like, oh, wait a second. That's your first name? What's your last name? And that last name, of course, not only is just like, something's not adding up here. She knows full well what that name entails. And when she goes and Googles it very quickly, this kid is missing. And she comes up with a plan immediately. I really was impressed by her here. She doesn't like second guess herself or anything. She's like, I'm going to take action. And her decision is, what do you think of her plan here? It's not a bad plan for someone who's, you know.
The plan is good and the plan is bad, right? Because I think she's thinking about the immediacy.
Yeah.
This child is missing. This child does not belong in this house.
Yep.
What is a way to get this child found so that I can get this child out of my house without having to personally get involved in this?
Right.
But I don't think she's thinking 3 steps ahead. The child has seen all of them, can describe all of them.
Right.
She doesn't know where he came from and how dangerous it is that he can describe all of that, right?
Right.
So I think she hasn't questioned why she doesn't know the answers to those questions. Right. So this seems like a good plan, and it is a sound plan, but the repercussions would probably be pretty bad if it were executed successfully.
Maybe on the one hand, she's like, whatever the circumstances are here, you know, if it's just fear in a way, because she thinks about, oh my God, what if these people come knocking on our doors? And she probably figures that she's relatively little blowback is going to go to her. But, you know, if Robbie ends up in jail, and maybe this is exactly where the show is going, she's going to have to take care of these kids herself. So she's going to be the surrogate mother there for sure.
Yeah. And I assume his illicit activities are funding a lot of taking care of this family.
True. That's true. Because, I mean, she doesn't really have an income to pay that whatever maintenance on the house is required. Although I don't even know. I was going to say, although maybe she does own the house outright, but that's not necessarily true. She might have inherited the house and a mortgage. And how's she going to pay for that? Not with her arcade money.
Right.
Yeah. Good point.
So it's both a good plan and a bad plan.
Yes.
I mean, listen, either way, I think she has identified the real problem, which is that this is unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
You can't hide this kid in your house forever.
Well, that's why I was saying that it was a good plan in a way, because I don't know how much calculation she did, but of course, yes, if this kid talks, this could all blow back on them. But to your point, are there any good options here? Like keeping the kid around for another day? That makes it better?
And she doesn't fully understand what the blowback is. She doesn't realize the situation.
Right. And by the way, if there's going to be some kind of revenge because this kid gets found out, is it going to be better if it happens a month from now? Is it going to be better if the kid gets injured along the way and something terrible happens? It's not going to get better. And maybe she's smart enough to be like, whatever bad is now, it's only worse tomorrow and only worse the day after that. So. And they like the practicality of it as well, right? She's like kind of saying, I'm going to go drop them off at the arcade. There'll just be kids around. I'll call in like, hey, I think I saw that kid. Although that's the other thing. I think she's using her coworker's phone. And if they decided to track back that call, that would be, hey, who called us?
No, it wasn't her coworker's phone. It was a phone that got lost in the arcade.
Oh, it was just, good point.
Yeah, there was a scene in the beginning where someone, I think the coworker is putting it in the lost and found, and they make a joke about how bejeweled cases are back in.
Oh, okay. All right. And then there's a bejeweled case. Very good. Very observant. Good job.
Thank you. Every now and then I catch something.
I had noticed that. So that's
I might not be able to tell you any character's name, but I knew that happened.
But you noticed the bejeweling on the case.
Yes.
Good job. Good job. And of course, by the time she ends up back at home again, she's just like turns on Robbie and she's like, what have you gotten us into? This, by the way, she has this opportunity to do all this because Robbie is supposedly meeting at this bar to find out who the informant is. Of course, we still don't know who the informant is. And maybe I have a question for you if you could guess who you think that might turn out to be. But that's when she makes her move. By the time he gets back, he's panicking. Where's this kid? And of course, Maeve comes in with the kid in her arms. But this whole sequence where she's trying to shake this kid off, he ends up back in the car. There's something
so
comedic about this and
yes,
terrifying at the same time, right? Like the when the cops are at the door and they want to question her, and she's trying to, once again, thinking on her feet. They want to pop the trunk, and she's just like, "Oh, I think I did see that kid in there."
Yeah,
she's just trying to create diversions to keep them from pursuing to what's actually going on inside that car. I actually got very worried here as well when he popped back in. I got scared when I was in there by myself, and then she disappears from the car. I'm like, "Oh boy, he better be in that car when she gets back." But I guess it all resets anyway. Although that might be another clue in the future that could lead back to them.
I thought it was interesting too. We always talk about modern technology and how it affects the types of plots that you can have and the plot holes that you have. Here, they specifically made a statement that there were no cameras in the parking lot, which I find hard to believe, but maybe that's how it is in Pennsylvania.
I wouldn't be so surprised in some places because I feel like, especially, at the local strip mall or something, they probably haven't updated all their technology yet. It seems to be they're maybe a little bit behind still, but so that's somewhat believable. But it is, it is a little convenience there. And then again, even if they had cameras outside, if you have like old school video cameras, you're not going to be able to read people's license plate numbers. If you have like a 4K Ring camera out there, which a lot of people do have, then that's going to be much more helpful.
Not license plate, but you'd be able to see the type of vehicle and that the kid got out.
Well, in her particular case, you'd see her and the kid running in and out of the car. So that would be a dead giveaway, even from a distance. Like, what's that kid doing? Why did she bring him here? And why did she get back in the car? And why did she get out of the car and not mention at all that there's a kid in the car with her, which is, very suspicious. And the episode ends, of course, they want to know who this informant might be. And they only have one lead. This is the gang, which is called Dark
Hearts.
Dark Hearts. That's right. I was going to say Black Hearts, but no, it's Dark Hearts.
That's Joan Jett.
That's right, the Black Hearts. And they have one lead, who is Peaches. And where was Peaches staying? Oh, staying at the Prater house. So at the end of the episode, they come knocking on the door. And I do not think things are going to go very well for Kaylee and David Prater.
Yeah, there was already screaming, so...
I mean, that might not mean that much considering her reaction previously, but if she thought, I don't like you guys when the cops showed up, boy, she's not going to like these guys at all. Yeah. And I'm actually very worried for these folks because I don't know if leaving them healthy at the end of this is in anyone, it does them any favors, the Dark Hearts. So this could all go very badly for them. I guess we'll find out next week. Okay. So a bunch of questions I have for you. The first one I want to kick off with here is, what's your guess? Who is the mole?
I don't think I'm much good at guessing these things, partly because I just want to go along for the ride. I kind of don't want to figure it out. But I did think the interaction with the bartender was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they seem to make a point of having that exchange and showing her. So I don't know if she's the mole, but I do think she is going to figure into this plot in some way. What's your guess?
I think the person they're trying to set up as the mole is that guy who was in the kitchen at the beginning.
That storms out of the bar.
Yeah. And then he even says at one point, like, who would even know about the drug drop? And he goes, there's only 2 people who know currently.
Yeah.
And he's one of the 2. So I think they're trying to make us think that's who it is. And maybe even the show will lean in that direction. But yeah, if I had to guess who it really is, like thinking like murder mystery type psychology here, that, I agree. I think that she's there. She doesn't really seem to like this guy who makes a move on her, who used to be the head, Perry, who used to be the head of the motorcycle gang. So maybe there's some resentment. Maybe she was friendly with this guy who was murdered. Maybe he's a friend of the family. Like, yeah, I have a feeling that, but I would assume now that it can't just be a random person. It has to be somebody that not only have we been introduced to, but someone we're going to have some empathy for. So when they're in danger, there's going to be some stakes. But it all remains to be seen. It could be some like real wild card. Like I was also thinking, what if it's like Perry, who's like trying to take the place down himself? And
certainly possible.
Yeah, that would be interesting if it was something like that. That would, maybe that's too much plot, but that would be an interesting twist if it was somebody who you would think is obviously couldn't possibly be the case, and then it turns out that that's who it is. Oh, of course, I didn't even make that connection, but they call like a meeting with everybody, obviously, because they're going to start to try to pressure people to find out who the mole might be. And so, of course, whoever the mole is couldn't show up at their meeting anyway. It's not only that he's blowing them off because he thinks everything's too hot. He probably had to go to the other meeting. So, in other words, he's busy that night. So he's not going to make that meeting with Robbie and Cliff. There you go.
So I made a comment before about Cliff maybe not being the sharpest knife. Yes. And this is the reason I think that. The burner phone featured really prominently in this episode. And you see that they're mostly texting in vague language. I have the package or, things like that. But Cliff's text says, fentanyl test positive.
Good point. I haven't even thought about that, but yes, he's just like, I didn't receive. But you know what? Maybe in his defense, if they're going burner phone to burner phone, it's different than you can imagine. Like when he says, hey, I got the wrong package. Can you call me back? You can imagine this person has some kind of business where if he is in a meeting with the rest of the bikers and he gets a push notification and someone looks at his phone and says, hey, I got the wrong package. Can you call me back? Or there was a delay in my shipment, whatever the particular language was on those more vague messages. That doesn't look suspicious as opposed to like, I guess if Cliff is texting him, it's burner phone to burner phone. It's probably not that bad. Although, good point though, that if the burner phone gets found, fentanyl test positive is definitely a dead giveaway. All right, a few interesting themes that I think that are being developed here. The big one here, it's right in the title as well, but it's the whole idea of family itself, right? We already touched on some of these things. Sam has a biological family, but they're locking him in the basement for a kid that seems to be not badly behaved, just inconvenient to them, of course, but seems to be. And he, in a way, very strangely, has now been adopted by Robbie. Of course, within Robbie's family himself, he is now living under in the house of his brother's house, of this like integrated family that is adopted to some extent in both directions. She is now like a mother figure to these younger children, and he is now a father figure, or at least a mentor. I don't know how much she looks up to him at this moment, but at least some kind of protector and mentor potentially. And as a matter of fact, they probably butt heads because there's probably some similarities between the two of them. And then, of course, you have explicitly in Tom's family the idea that there is part of the family that's adoptive. There's part of the family that is biological. And then the question as to, obviously Sarah's question as to, is there like more ownership to that familiar relationship if it's biological versus adoptive? And I think all these things are kind of playing out over the course of the show. Mm-hmm. And how do you think it's exploring some of these themes, or what aspect of that do you find most intriguing?
Wow, what a question. I think I'm most interested in, speaking of not knowing character names, Mark Ruffalo's families
Tom.
dynamic, because they have set up such a complicated situation that is so rife for resentment in every direction, that I'm interested to see how this all plays out and whether they're ever going to be able to find some place of common ground where they can somewhat comfortably live with each other going forward. And, for what's going to happen with the adopted son,
right,
with his sentencing. But I think you're raising an interesting point about the parallel in kind of the family you create and the repercussions of that, and whether it really matters whether people are your biological family or not. I think there is a lot of interesting stuff there to be explored. How many episodes is this series? Because I don't know what kind of time they're going to have to get into this.
I think it's only 7 episodes, so this is going to be pretty quick.
Yeah, it feels pretty quick. I'm not sure we can do a deep dive on some of this.
Well, I mean, I think it'll just be in the text of the show to a large extent. We're already introducing, if you want to parallel this story even more so, I think there's definitely going to be some aspect of the relationship between Perry and Jason, also this father figure, maybe a toxic father figure, maybe not. I mean, it's still too early to tell, actually. And these characters, I don't think anybody's like a straight up villain yet anyway. So there probably will be some kind of complex interactions yet to come between all of these father and son figures. But yeah, I also think about like, how good are you at being a father? You think these very different characters, the Tom character and Robbie, and then you see them like saying that they're being good fathers or trying to be good fathers. And in the one case, Robbie is presenting like, I'm a good dad, but is he? He's putting his family in an incredible amount of danger in this circumstance, right? And he's saying, well, I'm doing it to give my kids a better life, but isn't he just doing it for vengeance, perhaps? So there is this selfishness that is masking, or that he's performing that he's a good dad when he is arguably, endangering their lives. Not only endangering their lives in the immediate, like if someone comes shooting up the house and the kids are in there, obviously those kind of physical threat. But if he ends up in jail and these kids all end up like in reform schools, in foster homes and such, isn't that exactly what we see did happen to Emily and Ethan? And, things obviously didn't go well for them, although he had a psychological problem. But I'm sure that the way he was brought up didn't necessarily help those things either. So it's in a way this, cycle that we're seeing perhaps beginning again. But then you have Tom, who, is this pastor and seems to like want to listen to his family and is a righteous person and all presentationally is a righteous person. And this absolutely horrible thing has happened to him. But now he's failing his family too, right? He's like, he can't be a good parent to all of them. He's hurting himself. And he's also, obviously not in the obvious ways that Robbie is failing. He's also failing. And, but I don't think the show is criticizing him for that. It's just saying that, life is tough. And this is a circumstance that probably anybody would be failing at this moment. So I guess they're all trying to redeem themselves in some way.
Well, and I think also you see that Tom is struggling with alcoholism, right?
Absolutely. That doesn't help. Yeah, that does not help in this circumstance at all.
And that it doesn't help him. It doesn't help his family. And in a lot of ways, it's hurting his family.
Sure.
And I think probably part of what's driving his alcoholism is the same struggle of not knowing how to protect his family when he, I assume, loves his son like crazy,
right,
but cannot figure out if it's more dangerous to have him home or to have him in prison. And it's probably already, we don't really know enough about the history. I think possibly already living with the repercussions of the decision to adopt him to begin with, right? I think it's a similar idea of trying to protect people, but inadvertently putting them in danger, maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, that is, I can't even imagine, just you saying that makes me think about the backstory that we don't even know yet, because think about all the complexity there. If he really wanted to have more children and he pushed for it, and then this happened, does he blame himself? if he didn't want the kid, does he blame himself for maybe he was cold to the kid? Same thing. If he really loved this child, this son he had, even though he wasn't biological, and favored him in some way, does he feel responsible for favoring the kid and allowing this to happen? If he didn't want the kid, does he blame himself for what ended up happening? So it's one of those things where
what warning signs might have been ignored, right?
Exactly.
The one daughter is already telling these stories about things that she remembered happening, that maybe we don't know the backstory, but maybe he or they could have acted differently in response to these warning signs. I mean, it's a lot to live with.
It's like the tragedy you hear all the time about. I mean, some of these kids had warning signs and were dangerous for years and were protected in a toxic way by their family. But a lot of times you hear about these tragedies where these young perpetrators commit these horrible crimes that the parents really get caught off guard, and you really empathize with them, because it's just like they will oftentimes say, like, I missed something. How could this be happening and I didn't see it? Or vice versa, where it's like, I saw this, but I thought he would outgrow it. And like, so it's almost like no matter what, you just can't have there's no clean answer to why it happened and who's responsible and who's not responsible. And of course we can judge them from a distance, but being in it, I'm sure that's a torture they put themselves through. And the last thing I thought about here, which I'm sure will just continue to evolve these themes throughout the course of the series, of course, faith and forgiveness. I touched on that a little bit, but this idea that you're seeking solace in your faith in something, and what can you rely on? But it also made me think about this idea that, your family as an anchor in a positive way, where your family grounds you, but then as a negative way, where your family like kind of won't allow you to, disanchor, to move on, and how these people are all in the way trapped by their family situations, right? You think about Sarah, for example, blaming her dad for adopting these kids and blaming the adoptive kids, where, and specifically when you think about this kid, the actual perpetrators having a psychological problem, right? Like he was off his medication. So in a way, it's like not even something potentially that he could have controlled so it's like he had less even control over what ended up happening there in that particular case. And I had something else to say, but I can't remember. Oh, and of course you think about Maeve, who's kind of trapped by her circumstance. And theoretically, she could have, sold the house and whatever equity she had, gone to college and moved on with her life. But she can't, because she's anchored again to her hometown, to her family, and the responsibilities there of it. So I do think it's very interesting where this is the thing that defines you, your relationship with your family. And it's also the thing that's trapped all these people in their circumstance.
Well, I was thinking about how we all, in much different contexts, my life is nothing like the families that we're seeing in this television show. But I think we all struggle with that idea, or let me not speak for everyone. I think it's not an uncommon struggle to feel like your family of origin has certain expectations of you or has created certain circumstances for you that as an adult, you work very hard to break out of. And sometimes it's just very hard to leave that person behind because you feel like you're also leaving your family behind if you do that.
Right. And I think that all these, in an extreme way, the show is exploring that here for sure. And the last thing I think that it's illustrating here, and I think this goes back to Mayor of Easttown, even more so specifically on the religious aspects of it, but it's like, how do you seek solace? When something bad happens, where do you turn? And there is the family, of course, but like we said already, that could be a trap in and of itself. Sometimes it is where you find like the warm embrace of family. Sometimes it's a trap you can't escape because of all these burdens that are put upon you. There is, this FBI task force that is trying to, honestly, think about it. They formed this task force like as a way to keep him busy so he wouldn't think about these things. No one was actually sitting there thinking he would even crack this case. It was just like something to do. And so there's this question almost like of how much can this kind of institution even provide any kind of additional help. Of course, we all try, but I think that's, again, what the show is trying to say, right? That we are all trying to define our lives in the context of terrible things happening. Like, you really have to seek meaning in it all, because just saying, well, that's how I solve the problem doesn't work. And we see it over and over again. Mark Ruffalo, whether he was the chaplain at one point, now moved on to a law enforcement agency, being like, can you be a detective? Can you actually investigate these things and somehow prevent them from happening? And of course, he has, not only when it comes to his own home, he's kind of given up that, I think, at least in the moment. Yeah. And I think it's all about trying to seek meaning and redemption when these things are all failing around you.
Maybe there is some, not parallel, but I'm thinking about the character of Maeve and then the youngest daughter on Tom's side. And, both of them, I think, being carried along by their circumstances. And for whatever reason, by age or by circumstance of finance, kind of stuck in these situations where they are forced to deal with the repercussions of everyone else's decisions.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's even worse, right? When at least in some cases you can have like the illusion of having a say or contributing to being a police investigator or FBI investigator, being the breadwinner in the house. There's still like this, even if it's not a way to resolve the problem, you still can create this activity, like you're participating in it, you're doing something, you have some
autonomy,
right, as opposed to really, like you said, just being a passenger to these events. Maeve does seem to try to take if you're paralleling the two girls, Maeve seems to be taking some agency here with trying to return the son, although that didn't work out that well, of course. But and then maybe that's also what Emily is trying to do by making the statement for her brother that like no one else is going to speak up for him. And even though she has her own qualms about it, she just feels like, well, that's one thing she can do. And maybe she's the only one to do it. Question for you, by the way. Do you think he is Emily's biological brother also?
I think so, because there was some kind of reference that made me think they were adopted at the same time.
She says when they're at the table that Sarah's like, what do you think you're going to do by making this statement? And she says, maybe I could at least explain how we were brought up. And I didn't know if she meant generically, like we were brought up before we were adopted. She goes, how we were brought up before we were adopted by mom and dad. But when she said we, I was wondering, does she mean like, well, because we were both in the foster system, like just kind of generically, or like we were in the same home before we were adopted? And I don't know. So I guess maybe I think we'll probably get more details about that as the show progresses.
Yeah.
All right. So that was surprising that there's still some comedy in here, but that was pretty somber and very tense, by the way. I was, again, on the edge of my seat at the end of this episode, even though this is just good filmmaking, by the way, because I knew that he was not going to get caught up that day just from seeing scenes for the next episode. Like they previewed like this season that she has this confrontation with Robbie saying that he needs to do something, or she's like giving him like a 1 or 2 day deadline. I forget what she says specifically. So I know that conversation occurs at some point in the future. So I'm like, well, I know he's not going to get caught now, but it didn't matter. I was still so on the edge of my seat during that whole sequence.
Yeah, it's really well made as far as moving the story along and constructing the story.
And beautifully photographed. I love these, really cool shot when they were driving at night last week, and the camera is like looking into the car, like through from an upper angle, looking through the windshield, and the music's playing, very evocative. And this week, so many cool shots this week, but just one is just that drone shot of all the gang members driving down the street, and like from this high point of view, and then kind of coming down to their level, very, very beautifully photographed. And also like all the intimate shots. You think about Mark Ruffalo, these really great performances, by the way, to be this naturalistic in these close-ups is really just the kudos to the actors for giving these kind of very lived-in performances.
I agree.
So same director, by the way, same director as last week. I don't know. I don't think Inglesby, well, he directed. No, he didn't. I take that back. I don't know if Inglesby does any directing or if he'll direct any of these episodes this season or not. It all remains to be seen. All right, Sona, thank you again, as usual, for the conversation.
Thank you.
Check out Black Rabbit if you want a little more suspense this week. You might be like that. I know you like I think you like the cast in general, but I know you like Jason Bateman for sure.
I do. Huge Jason Bateman fan.
And Jason Bateman with someone threatening to murder him at multiple times over the course of the trailer there's got some Ozark vibes there.
How could you go wrong?
This could be a sequel to Ozark. We don't know. This could be like he falls on really hard times. Turns out to be like Scuzzy selling his shoes on the subway.
Never know.
All right. So thanks again for the conversation, and I will talk to you.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.